breaking free. Yeah, we're breaking free. No more oppression. It's out for liberty. Breaking free. Yeah, we're taking a stand. Freedom's in our hearts. We're reclaiming our land. They try to silence us, but we won't be tamed. Voices getting loud, can't keep us in chains. We got the power, we got the might. Together we can shine, together we can fight. Feel the rhythm in your feet, it's time to stand tall. Raise your voice and shout, we're breaking down the walls. We're breaking free, yeah, we're breaking free. No more oppression, it's out for liberty. Breaking free, yeah, we're taking a stand. Freedom's in our hearts, we're reclaiming our land. They try to silence us, but we won't be tamed. Voices getting louder, can't keep us in chains. We got the power, we got the might. Together we can shine, together we can fight. Feel the rhythm in your feet, it's time to stand tall. Raise your voice and shout, we're breaking down the walls. We're breaking free, yeah, we're breaking free. No more oppression, it's out for liberty. Breaking free, yeah, we're taking a stand. Freedom's in our hearts, we're reclaiming our land. We're claiming our land, yeah.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy New Year. What is
Yes.
going on?
We're back at it again in 2025,
I thought we got canceled, but it turns out it was just Christmas.
right?
How are you, buddy? I haven't talked to you in a while. Well, I saw you
know,
on
yeah.
Spaces. Saw you on Spaces, but
Yeah, on our the X Spaces, yeah, but yeah, we haven't done this podcast for Township Liberation since the start of the new year, and so we're gonna pick up right at where we left off and get into your stuff, which I thought was brilliant. All your additional rules for new radicals. I'm looking forward to it because this is a man. I'm telling you, it seems like there is an awakening. I hate to be super optimistic, but it seems like there's a real awakening of people questioning the very nature of how they're governed across the world. Right? I mean, our friends in the UK and Terry and I have talked about this offline and on X. They're shocked, and rightfully so, at the decades of cover-up over rape gangs and other like horrendous criminal activities dating back to the 70s now. This is, Margaret Thatcher was prime minister, right? I mean, this is amazing how like all this ugly stuff is rising to the surface. And of course, Californians have already known, how corrupt and mismanaged our natural resources are. But it's one thing to know it, and another thing to take action, especially after the fact, after it's already too late and multi-million-dollar homes have burned to the ground. So there's I think there's, like I said, I hate to feel too optimistic, but it seems like people are really starting to question the whole fabric of governance, right? Like, is this really how we should allow this to continue? Like, can we really continue the way this has been going on? This can't be good, and we're feeding into this repeatedly and getting the same awful results. And what's more is we're getting all these things that are sort of hidden are coming to light as well. So again, I'm feeling a little optimistic that we can liberate some townships across the world.
well, that's all we have time for. So good night, everybody. And wait, no,
Right? I think it set the stage for what we're going to talk about.
I had to tease you. I hadn't started any crap yet. We've been 7 minutes. That's a long time for me. Sure. I always tell my conspiracy theory friends that are always saying, that all the conspiracy theories end up being true and how smart they are and everything like that. I'm like, wait till you find out I've been right the whole time, and it's the government. Doesn't matter what the conspiracy theory is. I've been telling you the whole time, it's the damn government. And behind door number one is always the big bad government screwing everything up, whether it's through corruption or just being bad at what they do. No matter what it is, it always ends up it's the government. So
and that's the best possible outcome is incompetence, right? That's like the best case scenario. In other cases, they're downright diabolically moving against their own people. That's the part that's really staggering. And a lot of that stuff is coming to light now too across the world. It's great. It's staggering, but it's encouraging in the same sense, because I don't think people are going to stand for it. I can't help but feel optimistic about that.
Well, you can be optimistic, and I can do my part of it. So
maybe a little less so. Yeah.
Yeah. Rose is here. Hi, Rose. Thanks
Hey,
for
Rose.
Rose is great. Rose shares everything we're doing. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Rose. Yes.
There's Casey. Of course, he agrees with
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah. Well, Casey's, again, Casey's right there in the thick of it, right? Analyzing and picking apart some of the gnarliest stuff that there is, out there. And I think he encounters enough people, just anecdotally, to say, yeah, there is an awakening. There is something happening, and as to whether it's enough to make a huge difference or not, maybe we'll get to see that. But I can't help but share Casey's optimism. I think we're onto something.
Yeah, I mean, he's been. If you guys don't follow Casey, make sure you're following Casey.
Please.
It's,
Yes.
American versus Government.
He's
been going through.
on X.
Excuse me, still trying to kick whatever this is. Speaking of conspiracy theories.
Oh God, there's that whole thing too. Yes.
Yeah.
Casey,
So,
we're going to talk more offline, I think, about that, Casey. There's more evidence to that effect.
Oh boy. No,
yeah.
here's Waz too. Hey, Waz.
Yeah, hey, there's another one who I know knows what's up. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but Casey, American versus Gov, he's been doing, a lot of this fire stuff, a lot of this New Year's Eve, New Year's Day stuff, just doing all sorts of stuff, just kind of picking through it. And he's got a great analytical mind for that. So he really just, takes it piece by piece and really, either analyzes or questions it piece by piece. So it's pretty interesting. So
yes, we can't endorse Casey enough for being one of these people that remembers to question authority. Like I remember when that was a left-wing value, right? Question authority. That's how old I am. And of course, then they became the authority, the left, and no, we don't want you to question that anymore. No, stop questioning us. But Casey kept questioning, so that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, there's his handle on X. If you can see that on the screen.
American versus Gov.
So Terry's here. Terry's still
Terry.
muted, so I assume that she's got nothing for us, but she'll be back in what I like to call the back room. She goes through all the comments, make sure we know all the questions are there. If you want to say something, unmute, Terry. We've been talking for like 15 minutes.
Okay, I am muted. Now I'm muted again.
There we go.
Please, right. Everyone, take note of the background behind Terry. I think it's brilliant. That's my favorite one so far.
Yeah, she's in a location that can't be determined by the background. Yeah, so Terry's taking care of everything. If you guys didn't see the big news, Terry has accepted the job of being the producer of not just this show, but all the shows we're doing under the Freedom Uncut umbrella. And so that automatically put her on many different watch lists. So congratulations on that, Terry.
Across the world, Terry. MI5, it's you're now on everybody's watch list. Interpol.
I was tired of just being on the FBI list. I had to spread my wings and fly.
Let's just be international with these watch lists. Come on, we gotta
we
start
make it
pissing
look
off all the others.
so much fun. So
yes.
All right, so I'll put Terry back there. She's going through all the questions. If you have any questions, if we don't get to them real time, we'll talk about them at the end. Thank you, Terry. And trying this a different way, it failed miserably the other day. So I'm like, let's double down. Let's do it. Let's do it again. So here we go. And yeah, so you can put the slides right in there and then they don't work sometimes, is what I learned the other day. So so welcome to Township Liberation. This one specifically, the rules for new radicals, where last week or a few weeks back, we went through Saul Alinsky's original rules for radicals and kind of adopted and adapted them for the modern age and the modern radical, and specifically for people that are interested in localism and agorism and things that Mike and I've been talking about in the previous 8 shows we've done on this. And that's all under the umbrella of what we've been calling Township Liberation, which we got from Mike's book, which we do on Thursdays at 8 p.m., similar to this Thursday at 8 p.m. right now. And make sure you're following Mike. look at this, Mike. I actually put Township Liberation on there too. So I'm
That's
like
nice.
way on top of it.
That's,
So
that is good stuff. Yeah.
there's the two handles, Mike's personal one and then the Township Liberation one. Follow Mike on both of those. And there's the book, Revival of Common Sense, The Case for Township Liberation. I tell Mike all the time, it's too low priced. The price is too low on Amazon. I think it's $5 on the Kindle. It's a great deal. I have 2 copies myself, so make sure you go get that before he wises up and changes the price.
No.
And I finally, speaking of miracles, thanks to Cajun Queen, or Creole Queen, sorry. She got my YouTube channel going with B and Terry and a bunch of other people. Casey, Cash, pushing it. Waz. I didn't even know how to log into it, and I logged in and found out I had enough to live stream there. So this is the first time I'm live streaming Township Liberation to YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, you can do that at Freedom Uncut on there. If you search Freedom Uncut, it's kind of funny. Apparently, that's the name of a George Michael concert. And so you have to go through a few George Michael concerts. So I would just go straight to the URL.
That's awesome.
So, so that's the YouTube. If you didn't catch it, Cash and I did a thing with J6ers on Monday.
Yeah,
we had 4 J6ers on, and we talked about 4 years after J6. That was pretty cool. Oh, Happy New Year. Some scary drones to say Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah,
and
scary drones.
Yeah, please share this out. Say hi in the chat. That's another series that we're doing. And we started a new game show, Rhino Hunters. But this weekend we're doing the original game show, which is You Aren't a Real Libertarian. We're doing that Saturday at 8 p.m. Mike is losing that badly. For those of you who have been keeping up,
terrible.
Mike's down big time in the points there. He's barely trailing Zach, though, if Zach's in the comments. So there's the You Aren't a Real Libertarian right there. So, so this is Saturday, 8 p.m. if you want to join us. Follow Terry. There she is. And then follow Waz too, please. And I've been mentioning Waz has subscriptions, but I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this, but Waz has gone through a bunch of bad luck recently and has a GoFundMe up to help him restore some household stuff that he needs restored after a string of terrible bad luck and some bad weather. And I just want to point out that I wouldn't even be doing this if it weren't for Waz. And I by no means would be as successful doing this as I am without Waz. A year ago, I got kicked off of X for the umpteenth time. And I told him, I swear to God, I'm not going back. Screw Elon Musk. He's a fraud and all this stuff. And I swore to God I wasn't going back. And for like a week, he talked me off the ledge. So I would not be on X if it weren't for Waz. And also, you ask Mike, you ask Terry, you ask Casey, you ask Cash. He's been a huge boost to all of us. He could have sold out and made oodles of money off of this, but instead he, uses his superpowers to promote the little guys like us and has done wonders for us. And he's in a time of need. So if you get the chance, please support Waz. If you click the little Cash icon in his profile there, that'll take you directly to the GoFundMe. Please help him out. Any dollar amount helps. Hope you don't mind me doing that, Waz, but it's with love, man. We want to see you, being taken care of and make it through this bad spell, buddy. So, and thank you for all you do for us. And I said share already. So that was the big stuff there. I didn't crash it either, man. It worked. Holy cow.
Yeah. It's working good, man. Working good.
I got all the stuff going.
And what Waz was actually pretty instrumental in keeping me inspired to stay active on X, back when it was Twitter and everything as well. I don't think I would have had nearly as much insight into the potential for Twitter and X if I wasn't watching Waz do amazing stuff, in particular when it comes to unifying liberty-minded people across a broad spectrum of backgrounds, right? He does that naturally. It just comes naturally to him. So in many ways, I'm trying to bottle what Waz has already been doing for the last 4 or 5 years and trying to make that into the next level. Like, let's not, now that we all decided we kind of like each other well enough, we need to start working together, particularly in our local areas and where we live. And I think Woz has got an innate formula for that, just in his personality and his online presence. So Woz, your inspiration, brother. All the best to you. Hopefully we can get you through this rough patch.
Yeah, and those of you that know me as well as Mike does, and as well as Terry and Casey and all of those guys do, know what like a nut job I can be at times. And like, I was done. I was literally done. There was no talking me into it. And Woz very patiently was like, come on, you had success, there's problems on this platform, but it's the best place to go. And, I'm like, dude, screw that, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, and talked me into coming back. And, so you can either thank Woz or blame Woz for me being
depending on your perspective, right?
Yeah. And Jump, I agree with you. I mean, it's not perfect. It's, about the best we have, but it censors the same as the other ones. So any censorship is bad, but yeah, I mean, that's why I started streaming, is because X started throttling me yet again. So now I control my own fate. I'm going out to multiple platforms here. I have the video. I own it. I don't have to request it from X, so that's why I went more independent. But yeah, I mean, you got to be on X if you're a liberty-minded patriot like we are. Yeah. And so that's the long story. But the punchline here was make sure you're following Woz, and if you can, donate through that cash link at the top there. And like, for the unifying thing, I just wanted to echo that he was, he helped me. I mean, he's helped me multiple times. I mean, I think he's promoted all of us multiple times. Yeah. When Cash got out of jail, he was the first guy there trying to help Cash get back on his feet after losing not just tens of thousands of followers, but like 100,000 plus followers when he went to jail. He's helped every single one of us. So, I mean, he's just been an absolute stud. So, not to turn this into a telethon, but, Woz is one of the guys that's worth a few minutes of you guys hearing us discuss this. So any dollar amount would help Woz. So please help him if you can. Cool. So let's get into it then. So as you mentioned at first, we talked about reimagining Saul Alinsky's classic, the rules for radicals, and making it more modern for freedom advocates like yourself and me. Right. And now part two, I just can't let things be, right? I mean, I have to, no. I have to put my spin on stuff. Yes. And, that's how you end up with a game show, Mike. I don't know if you were following that, but that's kind of how you end up with the game show.
Of course it is. And I love the you're not a real libertarian thing. That's honest to God, probably the most libertarian topic of all time is you're not a real libertarian. So, I love that. Brilliant.
Yeah. And the only thing that could have made it more absurd is turning it into a game show. So I was there for it. So,
right.
But yeah, so tonight, what I want to do is I want to introduce some brand new rules, updating, because only I would have the ego to say I could update Saul Alinsky's rules. So introduce some brand new rules designed for today's fight against centralized control, yes, and to empower us locally. So let's expand our playbook and make this, let's take it up a notch, right?
Yes.
So in part one, we explored Alinsky's 13 rules, which can be easily adapted for liberty, localism, and self-ownership. If you want to go back and look, we basically took it, gave examples of, what they were, historical examples, and then made modern tweaks and gave examples of modern ways that those could be applied to grassroots activism. And then we shared some strategies to, challenge concentrated power and promote decentralized solutions. So now in this one, I want to introduce a bunch of brand new rules that are tailored more for the digital age, for social media, and would be, useful for fighting for our local autonomy and our local people. Yeah. And so we wanted to take it a little bit beyond his framework and address modern challenges like surveillance and
Yeah.
corporate monopolies and indoctrination, things that weren't really big topics back in the 60s when Alinsky was doing these, the first time. I mean, not as big as Big Brother and facial recognition. And,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a dystopian nightmare that people that were plugged into how bad it was, I don't even think they imagined.
I can't imagine Saul Alinsky actually contending with drones and drone surveillance. I mean, can you imagine what he'd be writing today in light of all that? I'd like to think he'd be more liberty minded, in light of just the sheer, all pervasiveness of centralized power. I can't imagine he would have been a big fan of where even the political left had gone. But that's, who knows? It's all speculation. But yeah,
You always say that, though.
I know. I'd like to think people, assuming somebody is genuinely coming from a real place, and there isn't some sort of ulterior motive. And he meant what he said, and he had integrity and so forth. Even though I believe he was ideologically deeply flawed, of course, he was definitely Marxian.
If we were talking about Genghis Khan, you'd be like, I would think that Genghis Khan would be more liberal.
I'll get. You want to hear the positive spin? At least Genghis Khan. Listen. At least you knew with Genghis Khan, there was no pretense about that guy. I'm here to conquer you. I am a tyrant, and I'm here to conquer you. There's no pretense about that guy. At least you knew exactly what it was you were up against, and you had to find some way to counteract him if you knew Genghis Khan's hordes were advancing. So no, I think there's I think there's at least some degree of integrity within a Marxian framework that Alinsky was coming from. I would have disagreed with him, obviously, on all sorts of his objectives, ultimately, but nonetheless, I think he would have been appalled and definitely disturbed by how dystopia has essentially come to pass in a way that there's no way he could have fathomed that in the 60s and 70s.
I love how I really proved my point by jokingly proving my point.
That's true.
So we're going to talk about tools and tactics for empowering individuals and communities and how to reclaim our freedom. Basically, a synopsis of these is we want to fragment bureaucracy. So we want to decentralize and disperse the centralized powers that control everything now and dictate from the top down how we live our lives. We want to pull the trick out of our toolbox that Mike is always talking about. We want to nullify any overreach locally and reject mandates that don't serve community interests. We want to support local resistance and foster the skills and systems that will foster that independence. We want to reject forced conformity and protect individuality in the face of collective demands. We want to barter and trade locally, which is the agorism part of this, and build local economies to bypass the currency controls. And we want to boycott oppressive systems, which we talk about in BYO boycott. And if we can starve those systems that align with government overreach, maybe we can wrestle back some control that way. We want to embrace privacy, and specifically privacy tools, using encryption and decentralized tools to shield our communications and our data from government and those that spy on us, the corporations that gladly share data and backdoors with the government. This one's for my boy Zach. We want to leverage the blockchain for freedom, decentralizing governance and finance using the blockchain. We want to educate people on legal rights, which is something I think we want to talk more about this year, as how to leverage the law and basically the Constitution and the framework the founders put together for us to fight for our individual freedoms that the founders intended for us to keep. And then lastly, we want to demand transparency, and that's something our buddy Mark is working on with Direct Democracy, which is going to be a global tool, but he's down in New Zealand putting it together. And expose corruption through accountability, open access, transparency, know what's going on, and be able to look at that at the community level. So lastly, I just want to say why these matter. Modern challenges demand new tactics. And that was kind of a theme from last time. But, the digital age has created unprecedented threats to freedom, but also unprecedented opportunities to organize and utilize the technology to be a force for good and help us. We want to empower local movements. We want to strengthen communities against centralized control. We want to give you guys tools for everyday activism with practical strategies for resisting overreach and promoting autonomy, both at the community level and the personal level. We want to build coalitions across many different diverse groups and different divides that have been created by the powers that be. When we unite diverse groups on, shared principles, particularly freedom and liberty, we can find common ground to fight these powers together. And then we want to secure a free future. And this is one I like to think about. We want to leave it better than we got it for the next generation, for our kids, our grandkids, and those that come after us. So, we want to lay that foundation, teach them how to govern without the centralized power that's been taking away from our quality of life and our local customs and the things we love about our communities, and build lasting prosperity that is open for all to enjoy.
Amen.
So that was a mouthful, but that's where we're going. So anything you want to say before I open it up here?
I'm just again, I'm looking forward to one of the most empowering things I'd like to see materialize. If I was to pick any number of our different projects and various interpretations of rules for radicals, one of the things I really am looking forward to seeing happen is this idea that people can withdraw their consent to be governed. And specifically, they can withdraw, I'm thinking of property owners. I'm thinking of how local governing bodies are funded largely. They're largely funded. I mean, there's local sales tax, but which is more in the way, but there's also a great deal of local governance is funded through property tax. And how amazing is it that our friend Mark in New Zealand is actually working with some folks in New Zealand who are advocating for withholding your property tax and redirecting it towards a trust or a legal entity that you empower to carry out the fulfillment of infrastructure needs in your community. In other words, to do the job that your local governing body is clearly failing to do. Can you imagine how much differently things would have gone just here in Southern California recently if that was already in place? I think there's a lesson here, and I mean, Lord, hear my prayer for 2025. If we can get that paradigm to shift and people can realize, wait, I mean, why am I surrendering my tax dollars to this institution that's failing miserably to do what it's supposed to do, what I'm essentially paying it to do? If it's not doing, if you're not getting the results that you're looking for, why would you continue to feed that machine? So if anything can come about in 2025 across the world, it would be that revelation that people who are paying property tax can redirect those funds away from the institutions that's failed them, and towards something that can actually do what they wanted to do. That to me that's the good part about direct democracy. If you ask me, that's brilliant. If you think about it, that has a real lasting implication. So hopefully that's what we get to see this year. I'm certainly doing everything I can to try to bring that revelation about throughout this year.
And Terry said, grab a pen and paper.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to mention, whoops, I hit the wrong button. And I wanted to mention too, made me think of, our prayers for California and for Venezuela with what they're going on. I think Mike mentioned this in the intro. Part of my team is in Venezuela, and it's really bothering me. So that's probably why I'm a little snippier than usual.
Well, yeah, that guy. I mean, boy, talk about a country that needs to be decentralized radically as soon as possible. Absolutely, and I am, so help me, going to get a Rosetta Stone so I can try to launch some township liberation in Espanol in South America. I would love for there to be township liberation in parts of Venezuela.
Well, he could do it. He's bilingual. If we could ever get his power to stay on long enough,
Yeah.
one of the most oil-rich countries in the world, and they're poor and can't keep their power on. So that doesn't show you why socialism doesn't work. I don't know what I can do to show you that socialism doesn't work.
Right.
But yeah. So prayers to them, and yeah, I mean, to the point about California, it's what. I jokingly said this to one of my friends from California. I was like, well, the good news is FEMA's not going to be there for a while. So you at least have some time until they get there and start screwing everything up.
Because the mayor was out of the country. The mayor of Los Angeles. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so like, you said, keeping the money locally and starting a trust and how much better it would be. Yeah. I mean, North Carolina, it's, in the 0 degree range, and a lot of those people, never even got temporary housing. And I think FEMA is still staying in the hotels and taking up all the hotel rooms. So not only are they not helping people, but they're preventing people from even getting a hotel room at this point. And, so yeah, I mean, if we kept our money locally, those would be solved. Some charities like the Cajun Navy would be out there, helping, and people would be donating to them, and stuff would be getting solved instead of, finger pointing and as much as I, am sad about Laken Riley and what happened to her, we've got big problems in this country, and that's what Congress has to work on. I think is a very telling sign that, they don't really care about anything that's going on. It seems to me like doesn't matter if you're legal or illegal. If you murder somebody, you're probably going to jail. So I feel like that was kind of more just part of the Broadway production that they do, and not anything to do with helping the Carolinas or Maui or California or anybody that needs it.
Biden was quick to send some money to Ukraine, not so much California, which is interesting because California should be friendly territory for the Biden administration. Not my part of California, but but the parts that were affected largely are left friendly. So go figure. They won't even take care of their own.
That is pretty surprising, because I always assumed when they didn't help the South that it was because it was all red, but they're not helping the blue areas of California either. Or Maui for that matter, which was
Maui's very blue too. For all difficulties, right? Exactly. I mean, and the funny part is probably not so much anymore, right? I mean, that's maybe again one of the silver linings to an overwhelmingly dark cloud is some of these people are waking up to the fact that they really don't care about us. And I've spent my whole life indoctrinated thinking big daddy government is going to help everybody and is on the side of the people and whatnot. And here's a living proof that that's not the case. So again, maybe some revelation, some bitter revelation comes through from all this. Yes, David, really make it Ukraine again. Really, wouldn't it be great?
Yeah. Did you see? I put up. Terry said that Biden said he's going to pay for all of it. Didn't we vote Biden out? Like, isn't he leaving? Like, why is he still spending money? Like, I mean, he's acting like he just won the lotto, and pretty sure he just
lame duck president, man. Yeah, and guess what? He's going to be replaced by another lame duck president. So this is going to be this could be a spending festival. Wait till we hit 40 trillion. I don't want to even say it. In debt, but it's that's going to.
Did we hit it? Did we hit it while you were saying that?
Probably we may have. I need one of Congressman Massey's badges, I think, to have on my lapel here.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to the new rules here. So my first new rule is fragment the bureaucracy. And so what we want to do is disperse centralized bureaucracy to prevent the concentrated power that's been plaguing us for generations at this point. And so centralized bureaucracy leads to inefficiency and concentrated power. By dispersing bureaucracy, you weaken its ability to force top-down control on us. And the strategy is to promote decentralized decision-making and localized governance to make bureaucracies less effective, to make local bureaucracies more effective, make centralized bureaucracy less effective, and to make local governance more effective and responsive. So, that was the idea that was behind the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
The early American government was limited in its centralized power. And, another good example of that is the libertarians that all moved to New Hampshire with the Free State Project.
Yes.
They wanted to promote localized governance and strength in New Hampshire. We have decentralized technical platforms, open source communities, which distribute power across many contributors, not giving power to one person or a centralized group or company. So some modern tweaks to, how to do that, push for local councils to handle, community decisions, use blockchain for transparent, decentralized governance, develop digital tools for local decision making, like our friend Mark with direct democracy, encourage community cooperatives instead of relying on federal agencies and federal programs, and advocate for breaking up those large government agencies that have taken control over all of these things. So the strategies behind that would be propose local charters that reduce federal influence, build decentralized apps for community organizing, support local ballot initiatives to decentralize power, promote agorism and agorist networks that bypass bureaucracy.
Bypass everything.
What's that?
Bypass everything.
Yeah. And use community forums to challenge central mandates. So what do you think of those, Mike?
Beautiful. So of course, it's all beautiful. And I kind of launched into our discussion on the new rules, which reminds me a little bit of the Bill Maher, like, okay, new rules, when he goes to the new rules thing on his little show. But the new rules for radicals, I think underpinning all of that is going to be something along the lines of having a legal and technological, maybe blockchain driven alternative to handling your local infrastructure needs. I mean, this is the thing. Like, yeah, sure, I'm an agorist. I believe in counter economics. I don't believe in a centralized power of any kind, ultimately local or otherwise. Ultimately, I don't. But I will say, it helps to have an actual example of this is what it looks like when we do liberty, right? When we do individual liberty, this is what it looks like to regain control and to reestablish autonomy in a local community, in a local region, in a local governing body. This is what it looks like, and it looks like, if your local governing body doesn't do what it needs to be doing, if it's not performing its duties as you see fit, you redirect those funds and you create an alternative body that does those things, right? That's pretty darn libertarian, right? That's actually pretty agorist when it comes right down to it. But yet it's also something that, it's not scary when you kind of put it in those terms. Like, hey, all of these needs of your community are still going to get met. They're just not going to get met through the channel that's failed you, right? They're going to get met through some other channel, some other means. And it's just the awakening opportunity, the education opportunity of not just mouthing it in terms of some kind of philosophy that I read from agorist primer or something. It's not just something. It's not just book knowledge. It's like, this is practically what we have set up with an actual body, a legal entity, a trust to execute these needs. So most of those examples that you gave in fulfilling your rule number 14 is an opportunity for that to come to light. And it's absolutely something that I think we need to see happening in 2025. We need to start seeing some examples. Yeah, and not just in New Zealand, although that's going to be a great example. But we can start to work on this year and showing how that what we're used to having happen doesn't have to be the case anymore. We can acknowledge that it's failed us across the Western world and do something better. I love that opportunity, and most everything you listed there is an example of that.
So the second one we have is to nullify overreach locally, which obviously is rejecting mandates or policies that don't serve our community's interests. So local communities have the right to reject policies that harm their autonomy or their local values. So the strategy is to use nullification to resist unjust laws or mandates by refusing to enforce them or even just recognize them locally.
Yeah.
So some historical examples of that, and I went in the way back machine here for you, Mike, but
Excellent.
the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions of 1798,
That's right.
the states resisted the Alien and Sedition Acts.
Yes.
How you like that?
It was beautiful.
Uh,
A great piece of history.
the one you worked on that you were a trailblazer on, marijuana legalization, where states nullified federal drug laws. The
Compassionate Use Act of 1996 in California, absolutely, literally blazed a trail that allowed for patients to be taken off the ridiculous battlefield of the war on drugs. Absolutely essential piece of legislation. And it's funny, you know, the University of Michigan, and this is for Zach. This is for and for our friend Buds, particularly the University of Michigan did this whole thing about how terrible it was to have, you know, a citizen legislation coming up from the citizens to be voted on. I'm like, when really the exact opposite is true. It's like the legislators in California are the ones creating tyranny and problems and everything else. That proposition, Prop 215, I'm passionate about this because this was a big deal in the 90s. 1996, that was a citizen initiative, and it actually did challenge federal authority. Because why? Because the state government, you know, in Sacramento wasn't going to do it. They still, you know, have a habit of just, you know, going along with whatever the federal government tells them to do because they're entrenched with federal funds and redistribution of wealth. So yeah, it had to come from the citizens, and it's a beautiful piece of legislation. It actually is far superior to Prop 64, which was passed 20 years later, which supposedly legalized recreational cannabis, but medical cannabis, you know, was a decriminalization, and we've talked about this, was a decriminalization move, and it absolutely has more teeth to it because of that. Because there's no regulatory body that can go looking into your growing habits for your medical needs or whatever. There's so much more liberty in the original Prop 215 than in Prop 64 20 years later.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing thing that you were involved in there. So kudos to you, and very, very cool. I mean, that to me is like Hall of Fame type stuff right there.
It was groundbreaking, man. And again, of all the things that California has done wrong, and there are many, there are many things California does wrong, we got that right. And that's one thing I can be proud about legislatively, probably the only thing that I can be proud about legislatively in California.
Well, those of us that are old enough to remember Reefer Madness, you know, that none of that happened is pretty amazing, you know?
Yes.
So,
True.
you know, they produced materials and legislation and put people in jail and, you know, did all of these things to try to scare us and, you know, force us to not, you know, partake in cannabis, both for medical reasons, recreational reasons, but also as just a crop. And none of the bad things happened, you know.
None of it. Pure propaganda. And it blows my mind that people think, and here's the other thing, particularly people on the left. One of the more disappointing things to me is that they somehow thought that suddenly the government is going to be honest, right? Like somehow the same government lied to you about cannabis, that invented the term marijuana, you know, it is as a way to scare you off of it by giving it a Spanish name, you know, to kind of be scary. That somehow that propaganda machine stopped, right? And it blows my mind that people don't think that same manipulative government that did all of that and lied through their teeth, the same government that poisoned alcohol during alcohol prohibition, is somehow, you know, all going to be truthful and honest. And we should go along and do everything they tell us to do because they're the experts. Yeah, there's this bizarre. I have to describe it as Stockholm syndrome. I've got no other way of explaining why people can see how the government lied back then, but somehow believes they're going to be perfectly honest today.
you started to talk about the left there, and I'm still fighting this cold, so I'm trying not to choke. So you talked about the left there, and I thought you were going to go in the direction of, all my leftist friends that voted for Obama because he was going to legalize marijuana. Hey, some crazy news for you. 16 years later, between Obama and Biden, neither of them got rid of the federal laws against marijuana, or even made it not a Schedule A narcotic or whatever it is.
Even took it off the Schedule 1. They didn't even do that. Now, I'm old enough to remember when my left-wing friends thought Bill Clinton, because he had admitted to smoking it, was going to somehow take it off Schedule 1.
Didn't inhale though, Mike.
It didn't inhale, right? Ridiculous, right?
Did not inhale.
So instead, he creates the drug czar, and his administration, Janet, lead the charge against medical cannabis in California. I mean, at least, and I will give Obama credit for this, this is a rare thing for me because I despise Barack Obama, but he did back off of California. I'll give him that. He didn't do anything to make it cannabis any more free on the national level, but at least backed off the states that had the balls to pass legislation like we did in California. I will give him that. But come on, by then, so much damage had already been done. I could tell you the stories about one of the co-authors, Stephen Covey, the late great Steve Covey, who I ran his gubernatorial campaign in 1998 when he ran for governor as a libertarian in 1998, co-author of Prop 215. I mean, it was 1999, shortly after the 98 the gubernatorial election, where he did. We didn't quite even get 2%, but it was a fun race. The feds raided his Tahoe home on the California side on Tahoe. Federal police raided his home because they knew he was growing cannabis. It happened to be something that he needed to stay alive, and that was well documented by Nobel Prize winning scientists, Nobel Prize winning doctors, documented that he was the only known survivor of adrenal cancer at that time. And they still raided his home, put his life in danger by separating him from his medicine, and made it all an issue just to further persecute and drive home the point that we will not let you consume this plant. Is absolute insanity. And that was during the Clinton administration. So go figure.
So the next one on my historical examples list, and this is, going to be kind of a little controversial because it's got a bad name, but sanctuary cities. So sanctuary cities agree with what they're doing or not, but they're refusing to enforce federal laws, in this case, immigration laws. But the same concept of sanctuary cities has also been applied to sanctuary gun cities, right?
That's right.
So like people have taken that concept and applied it to the Second Amendment. So that concept is awesome in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It can be applied in a way that's actually, I think, kind of destructive. But at the same time, I mean, again, immigration is an interesting thing. Peaceful people should be allowed to travel. I'm going to go ahead and come out and say this. Peaceful people should be allowed to travel freely. Across borders, right? I don't think government should get in the way of that. But what we're experiencing now is something a little more orchestrated and a little more dangerous. And I think, the George Soroses of the world are taking advantage of that. And ironically using, though, and I think what you're saying is there's a certain ironic application of nullification that we liberty people can do just the exact same thing for any number of things, not just gun ownership, absolute gun ownership. Like I want, I want the freedom to own my RPGs and, and my anti-drone technology and all the things that I'm afraid we're probably going to have. But, there's all sorts of other methods of nullification that are going along with this. So to your point, I mean, the city of Huntington Beach is doing the opposite. It is kind of the counter sanctuary city and nullifying all the nonsense coming out of Sacramento, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, lockdowns, anything to do with social distancing or any other social requirement, anything requiring some sort of coercive power being enforced on the people has been nullified in the city of Huntington Beach. You know what else has been nullified? Not checking voter ID, which you're not allowed to do anywhere else in California. And the state of California is still trying to Bonta and the state attorney is still trying to force down Huntington Beach's throat. So yeah, Again, good old Huntington Beach, California is a counter sanctuary city, but using the same principles. The principle is nullification, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's an American thing.
Well, and to David's point here, he says, let's push government down to the most local level possible.
Yes.
And we can choose our government and make it, as small as an
Yes,
HOA, and you can switch neighborhoods if you don't like the way your government operates.
100%, David. Yes, that's exactly right. That's the model for township liberation, and that's where I can be essentially a minarchist, right? I mean, I may be an agorist in nature, but and we've talked about this. We talked this about on the spaces earlier this week. The fact is, I'll sign off on a government that small because I can monitor that government better. We can hold them more accountable. And as David points out, if all you got to do is bounce over to the next neighborhood, that's liberty. I can just, this neighborhood over here is handling things a lot better, and they're giving their citizens a lot more freedom. There's a lot less imposition, and there's a lot less busybodiness, or whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to go over to this neighborhood. That would be great. That's. Can you imagine how much better that would be than what we have now anywhere in this country or the world, for that matter?
Well, that's why I don't mind sanctuary cities. I mean, when the tyranny level in Illinois got too much, I left. And we have a different form of tyranny down here in Florida, the free state. But I chose this tyranny over that tyranny, and I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love saying that. I think that Florida is a tyrannical government because it irritates some of my friends. So I like to drop that whenever I can.
I think you have a point when you do that, obviously. But yeah, that's okay. So you're basically picked a different form of tyranny. So the one you could decide you could live with a little bit better than another. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Yeah. I picked a more elderly tyranny, basically. So two other historical examples: sheriffs against gun control, where local law enforcement refused to enforce federal gun restrictions. And then you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but prohibition, where some states refuse to enforce federal alcohol bans.
That's right.
So, that goes all the way back to obviously before prohibition, but that's a huge example right there. So some modern tweaks for this is create local ordinances, rejecting federal mandates, educate local officials on their nullification rights. Some government officials don't even know that they can nullify state and federal decisions and regulations and laws. Use blockchain to vote and affirm community decisions. So that's something that can be securely handled. Develop legal support for local nullification efforts, and form local coalitions to amplify nullification movements. And then modern strategies for this rule would be pass community resolutions, rejecting overreach, use social media to rally support for nullification, host workshops on nullification rights and constitutional rights, support local support local law enforcement refusing federal orders, and launch legal challenges to unconstitutional mandates.
Beautiful. I like the idea of two things. First of all, I'm an agorist. I'm a law enforcement skeptic, but I can tell you that I have been really overall quite pleased with my local sheriffs because they refuse. I mean, every gun control nonsense that comes out of Sacramento, they basically say we're not going to enforce that. That's great. You legislators up in Sacramento can say whatever you like. We're not enforcing that. That's unconstitutional, and we know that we are swearing an oath to uphold the Constitution, and thereby we defy you and effectively nullify you, Sacramento legislature. So kudos to I have nothing but positive things to say about our local sheriffs. That kind of thing can be fostered and encouraged, I think, at the local level. I think it's actually really powerful. And again, this kind of comes back to what Mark's working about. There's a big question, a big debate among the libertarians, anarchists, MAGA types. We are all kind of like, what are the chances of your local law enforcement obeying orders that are unconstitutional? And I always, like to think that majority will probably do the right thing. But even if that's not the case, really, the question is, are they going to choose their pension over the Constitution? And if we are doing what my friend Mark in New Zealand is suggesting and redirecting our tax dollars and saying, look, we'll pay you to do the constitutional thing. Like, you don't need to rely on these centralized powers, this redistributed wealth. We will pay you to be our law enforcement, and we will expect you to follow the Constitution and constitutional limits of your own power and authority. We expect you to follow the Fourth Amendment. We expect you to respect our Second Amendment. We expect, these are our expectations. Oh, by the way, we're not paying the governing body. We're not paying this entity any longer. You're not going to get paid through them. You're going to get paid directly from us. I think it kind of has an extra weight behind it, where they no longer have to feel like they got to give up their pension, so to speak. It's like, no, we'll fund your pension. We're going to do it by redistributing and redirecting our tax dollars towards an entity of our own making that will execute law enforcement the way we, as the governed, see fit. And I think there's a brilliant potential for that.
So my next one is that I think is missing from Alinsky's original rules that apply, as how they apply to us, is support local self-reliance. So we need to foster the skills and the systems that make communities self-sufficient. And self-reliance reduces dependence on external authorities and centralized systems. So the strategy is to encourage communities to develop local food systems, energy, and economic systems so they can be self-reliant and successful without begging the centralized powers to take care of them. Historical examples of this would be the Victory Gardens in World War II, where citizens grew their own food during the war shortages. The Homestead movement, where settlers built self-reliant communities. One that was big in this election that got a lot more focus is the Amish communities, who we used to think that they were all ass backwards and that they were, living in the Stone Ages. Turns out might be smarter than us, and maintaining their own self-sufficient lifestyles may have been the right move all along. And I don't know if you saw the recent story, but they're building homes for the hurricane victims, and the federal government's trying to shut it down. Right. And I think they built like 85 homes for a few $100,000. I think it ended up being like 25 grand for these small houses, and they built them all in a weekend. I mean, like, FEMA hasn't done that much since Katrina, and the Amish knocked it out like in a weekend, and probably, didn't have a single crop die either. That's
right. We could replace FEMA with the Amish, and the whole country would be far better for it.
So lucky, yeah.
Right, we should be so lucky. And between the Cajun Navy and the Amish, we don't need federal disaster relief. I'm just going to come right out and say it. There are better alternatives. The Amish did get it right, Casey. We have better alternatives right now. It's not like we have to stretch to find, who's going to take care? We already have that. We already have people that are doing a far better job than our federal government at taking care of things. Let's empower them. Let's redirect our tax dollars. Let's be Henry David Thoreau and redirect those tax dollars towards people that actually do the job that we need them to do. And of course they're trying to shut it down. This has now become a publicity issue, right? Where we can't let people know that there is a far better alternative to the government. Hell, this is why the Roman Empire persecuted the Christian church. It's like, because they're taking care of the people better than the empire. So it's just, we're reliving the same thing. It's happening all over again.
And a more modern example would be the off-grid living movements, where they promote energy and food independence and don't rely on the grid whatsoever. So some modern tweaks to that is developing community energy sources. If you live in a place that you can do solar or wind, you can do those as a community project or a co-op type project. You can foster local farming through co-ops and the farming movements where you can, basically buy a subscription directly from the farm for their goods in advance. You can encourage decentralized manufacturing. The micro manufacturing is a big movement now through 3D printing, where people can not rely on the global supply chain issues and develop things locally through micro manufacturing and 3D printing. One of my buddies, Tropical Regicide, does this, teaching survival skills and how to live off grid and homesteading type skills, and promoting local barter networks. So there's some apps that do that, and there's a lot of local organizations that do that as well. And even things like flea markets and farmers markets, right? So some modern strategies for these is start local food sharing initiatives, create skill sharing workshops, develop community gardens, form those local energy cooperatives that I mentioned. And, another is develop mutual aid societies and provide support for your community from within your community.
Yeah, all that, and it's kind of in telling that Saul Alinsky didn't really raise the autonomy question, the localism. Why he wasn't much of a localist is because he still ultimately, as a Marxist, he still believed in a top-down centralized power. He just simply thought that his people of he's training and he's raising up should seize those levers of power, and they'll do it right. So there's a reason why that the rule you just added wasn't included in the original, because I don't think that was in Alinsky's wheelhouse. It certainly is in ours, though, as libertarians, as anarchists, agorists, whatever. It's certainly in ours, as most MAGA people understand the importance of a strong localized community. I think we've mentioned this a number of times. I think it always comes back to having the opportunity to share local community food and grow ops, as I'm starting to call them, where we kind of share in local food production as a community. If you can't do it necessarily in your own home, maybe you don't have the room or the space for it, but you can certainly contribute to a farming effort, a local farming effort. The same thing would apply as you just alluded, and I thought this was great because I don't think we've come up or brought this up before, but power and energy, and why not? We can have a co-op venture of shared power networks, and whether it's solar, even wind, although I'm not a real big fan of wind, I think, it serves its purpose in some ways. It's certainly not clean energy like they try to sell us as it is. And even solar isn't necessarily. Really, micronuclear would be the way to go for that. But I think that's a real avenue for self-reliance and autonomy in a local community. And that's absolutely essential going forward. The more autonomous your community, the more autonomous your township, the more liberated it's going to be. So I think that's those are phenomenal examples. One other thing that I think is kind of a opportunity is just having a network in place whereby you can share things, just tools and various things you don't necessarily need all the time. I'm kind of interested in learning more about something that the Orange County, California library system has, a library of things, to where you don't just check out books, you check out like stuff, tools, various things that people share, in the local community. There's a library of things at a lot of the local Orange County, California libraries, and they require some maintenance and whatnot, but it becomes a shared community set of tools and useful things, a library of things. So I kind of like that idea, right? I think that's again, it's empowering your local community to be self-sustaining and to encourage more and more do-it-yourself kind of thing.
You're a national treasure when people say stuff like this to you, Mike. Thank God you're
Yes.
safe, Mike.
Yes, we are. We're good in this neck of California, but not 30, 40 miles to the north, not so much. There's a lot of devastation in LA County, and that it breaks my heart. And I've been checking on Louise and a couple of our other friends who are residents of Los Angeles County, or even in this case also the city of Los Angeles. Everybody seems to be okay, but there's no shaking the fact that this has been a devastation, a completely avoidable devastation. I think that the part that makes it so frustrating is it was absolutely avoidable, at least to the extent that we're experiencing. It's horrific.
So the fourth one here is rejecting forced conformity. So refusing to surrender individuality for collective demands.
Yes.
Obviously, individual freedom is the foundation of a thriving society. And to me, it's a tenet of what the founding fathers wanted for us. So the strategy is to resist political or cultural pressures to conform to collective ideologies. Historical examples of this would be Thoreau's civil disobedience, which advocated for individual moral judgment.
My
The
favorite.
great Rosa Parks, who refused to conform to segregation laws. The Vietnam draft resistors, who opposed forced military service and, probably death. And Galileo, who defied church doctrine in his quest for scientific truth. And the objectivist movement, which emphasized individual rights over collectivism. And some modern tweaks for this is promote homeschooling or unschooling to get around that indoctrination angle that they have there. Advocate for individual property rights, support decentralized education platforms, encourage critical thinking and independent research, and using things like digital technologies like NFTs to assert individual ownerships over creative works. Some modern strategies would be creating communities that are focused more on individual freedom, developing independent media that promotes self-ownership and community organizing, organize events celebrating individuality, support legal challenges to forced mandates, and share the stories and journeys of individuals resisting conformity. So what do you think there?
I think resisting conformity is one of the most American things you can do. That's if you think about it, why the abolitionist movement was so powerful is because, of course, one of the most abhorrent examples of forced conformity, of course, is slavery, and racism, for that matter, goes right behind that. And that's why, to me, the next generation of liberty revolutionaries were the abolitionists. William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Henry David Thoreau, for that matter. These are, American heroes for a reason, because they demand a resistance to the collective. I think Ayn Rand, actually, for that matter, you mentioned objectivism. She found a real niche way of expressing anti-collectivism and individualism in a way that I think absolutely needs to be clung to. You don't have to follow every single tenet of objectivism to realize this was a very important philosophical resurgence of American principles that was brought about by this Russian writer in America. These are all fundamental to being an American, and also because of that, noticeably absent from anything Saul Alinsky would have written, right? But nonetheless, a valid rule for us liberty-minded people to be adding to the pantheon of rules for radicals. So well done.
So the fifth one is barter and trade locally. So using local exchange systems to bypass government currency controls. Local barter systems reduce dependency on government-controlled currencies, namely useless fiat currencies, and strengthen community bonds. So the strategies to encourage bartering networks and local currencies to create local resiliency and strong local economies. Some historical examples of this being the Depression era barter clubs, where people exchange goods and services without money to save money and get around some of the supply chain issues that were caused by the Depression. And Another one, it's now defunct, but Ithaca Hours, which was a local currency that took into account time spent, but it value as well. So you could kind of exchange hours for, in a time banking format, and which supported local trade and goods in Ithaca, New York.
Yeah.
Let's, which is the local exchange trading system, which is a community-based exchange network. And I just mentioned time banks, which exchange hours of labor as opposed to exchanging currency or money. And so you can tweak this in a modern way by developing blockchain-based local currencies, create bartering apps to facilitate local trade and bypass the bigger systems, host community bartering markets, use cryptocurrencies for peer-to-peer exchange, and promote skill exchanges within neighborhoods to help people match up and exchange their skills. So modern strategies for this would be starting a local bartering club, developing a community marketplace app, using social media to facilitate these exchanges, encourage local businesses to accept alternative currencies or local currencies, and create time banks to exchange skills and services. What do you think, Mike?
Brilliant, right? Again, I love the idea of just localized sharing. And it's funny. Again, it's kind of knowing Saul Alinsky was kind of coming from the idea of sharing. Like that's when people think of the positive side of socialism. It's isn't it just sharing? Isn't it just sharing? Well, this is what we're describing: voluntary sharing, right? Voluntary bartering is a form of voluntary exchange. It doesn't even involve currency. And yeah, absolutely. I think the blockchain has a way of playing a role in this new world that we're talking about, where we can essentially create a whole way of economic interactions that don't involve fiat currency. I think it's going to spontaneously erupt across this movement, the sort of the greater township liberation concept, where liberated townships will simply have their own currencies and their own exchange systems. Another thing that I've been made aware of recently is the way people can invest in small businesses, almost like a small scale stock exchange or a highly localized stock exchange to kind of bolster local entrepreneurs. And I'm kind of exploring that a little bit more. I think that's a fascinating concept. When I think of something, centralized economic power, I don't just think of the Federal Reserve. I think of Wall Street itself, as a great deal of centralized economic power. Well, what if we decentralized Wall Street? What if we decentralized all? I mean, it seems like there's got to be, with blockchain especially, and Zach would know more about this, but there's got to be the potential to decentralize the economy on that scale as well, in terms of how we invest in entrepreneurship, and certainly we can localize that, I would think, as well. So and I think blockchain has at least some of the key to opening that up and making that possible.
Absolutely. And so the next one is boycotting oppressive systems. So refusing to support businesses that align with government overreach. And, we talked a lot about this in BYO Boycott, which I'm hoping to bring back this year, and I'm hoping we have time for. This is economic pressure that can be used as a powerful tool for resisting authoritarian systems. By refusing to support entities that align with or benefiting from government overreach, you weaken their influence. So the strategy here is withdrawing financial support from businesses, organizations, or industries that enforce or benefit from oppressive policies. Historical examples of this being the Montgomery bus boycotts, which was in the 50s, where blacks boycotted public buses to protest segregation. I just watched a great documentary about Stephen Van Zandt, about his part in the anti-apartheid boycotts, and Ain't Gonna Play Sun City.
Sun City,
you know?
yeah.
And so the anti-apartheid boycotts in the 80s, and which was the global boycott of South African goods, which finally pressured the government to free Mandela and end apartheid. The OG, in my opinion, in this matter is the Boston Tea Party in 1773, where colonists boycotted British tea and chucked it in the harbor, and
it's the
that was
ultimate
their response to unjust taxes.
Yes.
Gandhi's Salt March, which we've talked about before, where Indians boycotted British salt to undermine colonial control, which I just think is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And then the Nestle boycott, which continues to this day, if I'm not mistaken. But that started in the 70s as a protest against unethical marketing practices in infant formula. So some modern tweaks to this one is identifying companies that are complicit in government overreach and creating public lists that are easily accessible. Use social media to spread these boycott campaigns, support businesses that align with individual freedom and decentralization. Instead, develop decentralized review platforms to expose unethical companies, and create apps that suggest liberty-friendly alternatives to these bad guys. And some modern strategies is organizing buy local campaigns to avoid supporting monopolies, developing decentralized directories of ethical businesses, using blockchain for transparency, and identifying oppressive supply chains, and hosting educational webinars on the impact of economic boycotts. And then finally, promoting crowdfunding for independent pro-freedom businesses to, give them the resources to compete with the big guys.
That's good stuff all the way around. I think we have an opportunity to do a lot of work to the end of promoting liberty-centered business alternatives. And we also there's something about that list that you ran down that really kind of struck me as, there's so many. I mean, the larger the corporation, the chances are the more likely it is that they are effectively collaborators with our oppressive government overreach, with government overreach. I think that we could almost apply the same rule to politicians and the same alternative. Like I was particularly disgusted by all of the politicians. I mean, again, I don't have the pretense that Republicans should know better, but that you kind of expect them to at least somewhat know better nowadays. That all these politicians who voted to reauthorize the Patriot Act, for example, which is, again, I have mixed feelings about what happened here with Michelle Steele, who essentially lost to a straight up communist left-wing Democrat. But she herself voted to reauthorize the Patriot Act. So, I mean, is it really that great of I mean, I'll run against this guy next time. I mean, this is my district, here in California. I'll be the pro-liberty candidate, because she certainly wasn't. I'm sorry, Michelle. I mean, you're not. It's like, I'm sorry you lost in a way, but come on. I was thinking about opposing you anyway. So the point being is, we have politicians who are collaborators with the government overreach that we hate. There are collaborators with the surveillance state. And that's not acceptable anymore. Like there shouldn't be, a self-respecting, anybody that considers themselves America first shouldn't be behind that. That's not something that we should be tolerating. So same thing with businesses, though. Same thing with these multinational corporations. We should boycott all the above. Not only the politicians by running a liberty candidate against them, but who are these folks that blatantly are violating the Fourth Amendment of their constituents. But also the businesses, the multinational corporations who are effectively doing the same thing. They're certainly collaborating with a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights, among others, I'm sure. So yeah, this is the same kind of spirit. But yeah, I think there's a since the private public sector is already so blurred, please don't ever tell me we have a capitalist society, because that's laughable. But the same strategy applies, I think, whether we're talking about a multinational corporation or a political figure, an elected official. And I think that the similar boycott strategy should be taking place. And I do think we need to bring back build your own boycott, because it's absolutely essential to the liberation of your township. You can't be continuing to fund your own oppression if you can avoid it.
Welcome, Priscilla. Thanks for joining us.
Hey,
And
Priscilla.
thanks for sharing. We're over 1,500 people. So hit share one more time if you don't mind, everybody. We've been getting really great numbers. So I think we're about to hit 15,000 views for the 8 episodes we've done, including this one.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool.
It is.
So the next one, and you'll be shocked to hear me say this, but my next one is question everything. Treat all information, especially from authority or corporations, with skepticism. And we were talking about,
Assume it's all reefer madness.
Yeah.
Assume it's all propaganda and lies.
We were talking about the conspiracy theorists that say they're right. I've been saying this my entire life. Question everything. So, so critical thinking is obviously essential to preserving our freedom. Blind acceptance of any information, particularly from authorities, can lead to manipulation and control. And I really think that's the only good thing that came out of COVID is there's a lot more people questioning authority. They might be spreading polio, but they're questioning authority. So
at least they're questioning authority, though. We can take our individual chances against certain things, right? But my God, stop believing what's being spoon-fed by the dominant media narrative.
So the strategy here is encouraging a culture of skepticism and independent verification to challenge the official narratives that are being forced on us. And some historical examples of this are the scientific revolution, which questioned long-held beliefs, mostly from the church, that led to significant scientific progress and gave us the kickstart of the amazing period that led to where we are now with all this great science and technology. The Enlightenment thinkers, which promoted reason and skepticism of religious and political authorities. The Pentagon Papers in 1971, which leaked documents revealing government deception about the Vietnam War, and also Edward Snowden's revelations, who he absolutely needs to be pardoned. And, he encouraged skepticism of government surveillance programs. So modern tweaks for this would be teaching media literacy so people can be better informed about identifying biased information, using decentralized fact-checking tools, promoting whistleblower protections, developing platforms for anonymous information sharing, encouraging open source research and peer review. And then modern strategies would be doing something like what we're doing here, where create a podcast or a YouTube channel to promote critical thinking, host community-based discussions on verifying information, developing blockchain-based fact-checking tools, sharing guides on information and identifying propaganda, and supporting independent journalism that can do investigative journalism and challenge authority more easily. What do you think, Mike?
I think all that, of course, is brilliant. But the another thing that's really critical to your point about questioning everything is comes from the fact that I hang out with on a regular basis a language theorist and theologian, Yale student and professor of language theory. And I've come to realize how absolutely critical language is. Philip K. Dick, who wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which became Blade Runner and its sequel, wrote very famously wrote. I mentioned this in Revival of Common Sense, but he wrote this really chilling kind of evaluation of language. Is that those that basically ultimately it comes down to, I'm going to paraphrase, those that control the meaning of words control the people that that are forced to use those words. So watch what has happened in what's called deconstructionalism. It's where the language itself has been so distorted, it's so torn down and abused, and definitions are so askew from their original meaning on a lot of key English, just in the English language, a lot of key words, that it's become a force for manipulation on a scale that we aren't necessarily aware of. It's something maybe we can feel instinctively, but we don't realize how deep the manipulation goes when words have literally changed their meaning, and their definitions have changed. Now we've watched this a little bit, like you mentioned with COVID. We watched the definition of vaccine change, for example. And that's just one word. That's just one example. But I think what we would benefit from is a deep analysis in language theory to know how we're being manipulated, how we're being controlled, and quite frankly, theologically speaking, I consider it a form of sorcery. This type of deep-seated language manipulation, and I need to kind of build a resistance to it. We need to understand, first of all, the inherent beauty and power of language, and then also in doing that, we'll recognize how much has been manipulated, especially in recent years, and what the potential is if we continue to allow it to be manipulated and to continue to allow definitions to change and deconstructionism to continue. It's important to kind of know the origins of that, because it's really a foundational component of civilization, languages. And so I think that's a important study if we're to avoid being manipulated by our governing bodies and the so-called experts who are controlling the narrative. It's a very, again, you see me use this word all the time. I don't think I can underuse it. It's very dystopian. That's what we're up against. It serves dystopian interests to change the meaning of words to favor the existing power structure.
So the next one is uniting on core values. And this is one that's been important to me. And I think that it's important to build coalitions with those who share basic principles.
Yes.
And effective movements are built on common ground, and identifying shared values can help unite diverse groups for collective action. So focusing on principles like freedom, like I do and Mike does, justice, self-ownership, help you create broad coalitions. Right. And so I can talk with MAGA folks. I can talk with the religious right. I can talk with progressives and liberals, socialists, and talk about freedom. Like, if you want to be very moralistic, freedom will get you there. If you want to be a socialist or a communist or live on a commune, freedom can also get you there. Yeah. So how do we? Well, as long as you don't force me to live on it,
then we're good, right?
Yeah. How do we get people to unite on these, basic core values? And a historical example, which I think gets lost on people, is the American Revolution. These colonies were extremely diverse.
That's right.
Different religions, different goals, different interests. Yeah. And they all were able to unite against British tyranny.
Yes.
The abolitionist movement, same thing. Diverse religious and political groups that work together to end slavery. The anti-war protests, students, veterans, civil rights leaders, activists, all united against the Vietnam War. Occupy Wall Street brought people together from various political backgrounds to protest inequality. And civil liberties coalitions are made up of groups from both the left and right to unite against the Patriot Act. Yes. And so some modern tweaks on this are, focusing on principles of decentralization and self-ownership, using social media to highlight shared goals, develop local coalitions across ideological lines, hosting town hall discussions to identify common values, and creating decentralized platforms for building those coalitions. And from a strategic standpoint, organize local events focused on those shared values, develop joint campaigns with a diverse group of different organizations, use media and podcasts to highlight coalition success stories, create digital spaces for cross ideological dialogue, and support joint actions on issues like privacy or self-reliance. What do you think, Mike?
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do with Township gatherings. And I should have another one by middle of February here. I know that Marty's doing another one in Glasgow, Scotland, coming up in about 3 or 4 weeks as well. And that's the idea: is to bring people together of diverse backgrounds. When you think we have diverse backgrounds, in America, you can imagine, and we've talked about this on the X Spaces that we do on Tuesdays. You can imagine Marty bringing together in Glasgow, Scotland, everybody kind of united against their dystopian government in both Holyrood, the seat of the Scottish government and Parliament, but certainly in Westminster. People from very different ideological backgrounds brought together, unified under standing up for their liberty against a tyrannical dystopian central government, which Keir Stalin is a perfect example of that. But we had people, you told me in this gathering that were hardcore Scottish independence people, like absolutely want nothing to do with England, right, or Wales or anything. You don't want to be their own independent, Scotland, independence all the way, and absolute unionists, which Marty is kind of one. Like I want to stay part of the United Kingdom, but boy, they were all committed to the same. Like they put those particulars aside. Those are types of particulars. They put the particulars aside of whether or not Scotland should be independent or not, whether or not we should have a government that cares. There's a caretaker government, sort of a labor government, or we have a strictly limited government, like a la conservative or reform party, whatever. All those particulars were put aside in favor of how do we nullify this oppressive governing body. And he had some upwards of 40, 50 people coming into this gathering in Glasgow, Scotland. That's a perfect example of what we need to be doing in as many places as possible. I want to throw this out there right now. I might as well do this on this podcast. I want to help anybody who wants to organize a township gathering anywhere they happen to be in the world or listen to this podcast, whether it's they're listening in after it's already been recorded and so forth. The idea is gather people together under the principles of individual liberty and consent of the governed. That's something a broad spectrum of people can agree upon, even people who maybe consider themselves liberals in the old school sense, but certainly conservatives, libertarians, MAGA, anarchists, agorists. We all can agree that the principles of individual liberty and consent of the governed are strong enough to unify us and enough for us to put aside our individual particulars. Again, I'm an agorist. I have those particulars very strongly, right? I will mention, things from Libertarian Manifesto or Agorist Primer from time to time, but it's not going to be a deal breaker for me. I'm not going to let those particulars that I still hold very dear to interfere with the coalition that I can build in repelling the dystopia. Let's get rid of the dystopian forces first. Then we can talk about the finer points of how to protect individual liberty. But let's get rid of the dystopia. Let's unite against the dystopia first. The American Revolution was a fantastic example of that. Abolitionism was a fantastic example of that. For crying out loud, you had William Lloyd Garrison, who is a devout atheist, if you can appreciate the irony of that statement, along with members of the clergy, defying the institution of slavery, and rightfully so. And these types of coalitions are founded on principles and letting principles dictate our actions and unify us, as opposed to letting particulars get in the way. My own particulars of, well, I have this type of faith and I don't want to work with atheists or what have you. None of that happened. Any of these successful examples that you mentioned, none of them had particulars get in the way of the objective. It was all about sticking to the principles. And these are American principles. These are beautiful. I mean, you may think nationalism is gross, but you can still work with a nationalist to repel the dystopia based on those principles. So again, the potential is there to do amazing work. And I want to help anybody who's listening to this and message me, whatever, but let's work on building township gatherings wherever you're at, so we can at least bring people together and do as Ben Franklin suggested, which is all hang together, or else we will hang separately. And it's better that we hang together instead.
So I'm going to speed up a little bit here to make sure I get the rest in here, because I get a little frisky at the end here. So those were like kind of the bigger ones, but I wanted to get a little bit more, us anarchists, we get kind of a bad rap, and
Yes,
so I wanted to push, some more alternative ideas here. But the first I want to talk about is sourcing locally. And, not included in Alinsky's original rules. And on the surface, it sounds like a pretty tame idea, buying from local suppliers to avoid, supporting corporations and globalists and centralized power. But at the same time, it's something that can't be disrupted if they want to disrupt your local organization that's fighting back. So relying on local supply chains strengthens the community's resilience as well and reduces dependence on centralized systems, but it also can't be disrupted or manipulated as easily. So, buy local kind of sounds like a marketing thing for, the local flower shop or something, but it's also a key way to have resistance against all things globalist or centralized. Right. So again, the strategy for buying local is prioritizing local businesses, farms, suppliers, anything that can support your local community autonomy and help build economic stability on the local level. And I'm not going to go through historical examples or anything like that, but again, similar things like that are encouraging local energy production, supporting local farming initiatives, urban farming initiatives, the one that I tripped up on earlier, which is community supported agriculture, where you work directly with farms and pre-purchase that year's harvest. Things like that. So what do you think about my buy local to fight tyranny idea, Mike?
No, it's absolutely necessary. It's again, anything we can do to bolster your local township, and to strengthen it is going to be helping to liberate that township. And again, it's also not surprising that Saul Alinsky kept that out of his original rules, because he still saw things in terms of a top-down centralized power. He simply just wanted to seize those levers of power. So I can see why he didn't have that as part of it. And yet he should have, if you think about it. That's actually a more consistent approach. I dare say that's probably a little more consistent with Marxism, even to have local control over your well-being. It certainly isn't very Stalinist, because Stalin liked to starve people. But it is kind of Marxist in a way, right? So it should have been there in Saul Alinsky's original work, but he was thinking, no, I don't mind, that there's top-down power, centralized power. I just want to put my people at the levers of that power, so in control of that power. So and therein lies the difference between what we're trying to do with the new rules for radicals and the original rules for radicals. And yes, absolutely, buying locally to snub the major corporations. Absolutely, we should do that. That also speaks to your build your own boycott. Absolutely, we need to do that, however and wherever we can.
So my next one is cultivate a rebel mindset. I was shocked to learn around second grade or third grade that not everyone was born like me, where they would rebel against pretty much anything put in front of them. So we need to cultivate a rebel mindset and develop mental toughness to withstand pressure and opposition. Okay.
Yeah.
And so if we have a more resilient mindset, that helps activists stay committed despite challenges, suppression, oppression, ridicule, whatever they fight back with. So the strategy is encouraging critical thinking, adaptability, mental fortitude to resist the external pressures that you're going to face. So, offer online materials and resilience and critical thinking, help with promoting stress reduction, mindfulness, develop decentralized communities that support each other, and host workshops or online forums to help people develop psychological resilience. So what do you think about cultivating that rebel mindset, Mike?
Well, yeah, that's brilliant. And the funny part is, of course, so much of our popular fiction celebrates the rebel mindset, right? Forget. I mean, Star Wars is the rebels, the resistance, whatever era of Star Wars you want to talk about. I mean, it's the rebels are celebrated, but yet when it comes time to do rebel things in real life, well, I don't want to. It's like I don't want to break the rules. We need to kind of. Yes, I think there needs to be a cultural shift to bringing that celebration of the rebel spirit that we appreciate in fiction to our real life experience. And history also is a celebration of rebels in a number of ways, at least in this country, right? And so that needs to be celebrated and brought more to the surface. The other thing that I think is really interesting is with the way we approach, rebelliousness and shifting paradigms. This is also an opportunity to get people to think a little differently about how they allow themselves to be governed, like how these entities, extract money from us to fund these things that ostensibly are supposed to be serving us. And yet, when that's not happening, what's the remedy? What's the fix for that? And I still think our guys in New Zealand have got a finger on the pulse of how to address that. And one of the ways to cultivate a rebel mindset is to realize, wait a minute, I don't have to, just because it's expected of me, just because there's a coercive threat, if I don't, doesn't mean that I have to give you my tax installment on my property tax to your governing body when I have this entity over here that is going to perform this, needed societal function, and be actually accountable, far more accountable, and are going to be transparent about it because they're obligated, to be that way, because this is a trust, this is a legal entity. I'd rather put my money in their hands than disperse it to the local tax collector, the county tax collector. That's a type of rebel spirit, I guess you could say, that I would love to just make go viral. Like I want that to explode in 2025. Just that paradigm shift alone would be huge. Wait a minute, I don't have to just do what I've always done and do what my parents have always done and pay these property taxes directly to this. What's going to happen to me if I don't do that? Well, find out. Because whatever's happening now, they're not doing. Like let's have that fight. Let's see that through to its logical conclusion. If enough people, as Thoreau has suggested, enough people don't comply with this expectation of paying taxes, that and instead, and we're not saying don't do the things that taxes are supposed to do. We're just saying don't supply your current tax recipients, or either the governing bodies are supposedly receiving your taxes, to no longer supply them with your money, but instead redirect it towards an entity that's more accountable. I mean, would be a huge increase in rebel spirit that I think we desperately need.
So my next one is, these are the rules for radicals, or the new rules for radicals.
Yeah.
So set radical goals, aspire to be
yes.
bold, and make transformative changes. And, incremental change, while we talk about that as a solution and as a compromise, that can be slow and ineffective. So setting ambitious goals may inspire the people that you need for a bigger movement and challenging the status quo. So the strategy is to aim for transformative outcomes that challenge existing power structures and inspire that bold action. And I mean, there's great different, a ton of great examples of this throughout history, like the abolition of slavery. I mean, they thought that was a completely unattainable goal, that, the entire economy was based on it. And, they took down that. Women's suffrage was another one. The civil rights movement was another one. Ending apartheid was another one. So, I mean, there's historical examples of people taking that on. So things that, you may want to consider here are advocating for the complete decentralization of governance, pushing for abolishing oppressive agencies and laws altogether, promoting universal privacy through encryption and blockchain, developing self-sustaining local economies, and calling for the end of monopolistic corporate control in general.
Yeah, no, I think you're hitting the target here, because what we have is we have a group of people that may say, well, that's a little extreme, but good. I want them to say that, because I go good. I tell you what, then. So I'm aiming for the complete, like, say for example with education, I'm aiming for the complete decentralization of education, for example, which to me, going back to good old Marshall Fritz and the separation of school and state alliance of the 90s. Separating school and state the way we separate church and state, and for the same reason, right? So I want to absolutely separate school and state. I want the government completely out of education altogether, period, end of story. I am willing, let's shoot for that goal, first of all. And if you think it's a little too radical, that's fine, because chances are I won't necessarily get there. If I do, then, let's talk about what scares you about that, having achieved that success. But let's also realize that even if we get anywhere in range of that, it's going to be a vast improvement over what we have now. So it's almost like I am looking at the more comfortable center, the people that are maybe more comfortable with the way things are, that still want to see change, but are still kind of comfortable with the status quo, as being people who can be pulled along towards liberty. A little, like, even if I have to yank them like a reluctant dog on the end of a leash, like let's go just a little bit further, and let's see what we can achieve. Chances are we'll still end up with something that is maybe a little bit not as scary, or maybe it ends up being, we end up pulling something off. But the idea is, let's aim for the more radical end. And if you're comfortable, with the way things are, maybe not getting as far as I would want them to go, but it's a lot more liberty than we once had, then let's talk. Let's okay. Well, if you want to stop here, that's fine. I'm going to keep pulling. But if you're comfortable with a highly decentralized but still government-run education system, okay, that's fine. Stay there for a little bit, see how that works. I'm going to keep pulling. But I still think there's something to be said for pulling the center along out of the quicksand of statism and what is essentially become a dystopia towards liberty. I think we have to make those big pulls, or have those big goals for liberty, and try to pull people towards them, even if we don't necessarily reach those goals. I think it's important to pull people that direction, and to get them to realize how far we've descended in the other direction, towards a centralized power and essentially a dystopian condition that we're living under.
Yeah. So my next one is actually, I'm gonna try to do two in a row here because we're running out of time. So my next two are flooding with truth. So overwhelm propaganda with facts, and propaganda thrives on misinformation. So flooding the public discourse with verifiable facts dilutes the power of propaganda and restores the truth. So we've seen examples of this, and it's one of the few things I'm optimistic about, is people using technology and social media to counter false narratives by
Yes.
distributing accurate information widely and consistently and overwhelming the propaganda machines. So we've seen examples of this during wartime where underground newspapers and other information was disseminated to counter propaganda. We saw it during the civil rights era. We saw it with the protests against the Vietnam War. And then we've seen it with Snowden and Julian Assange, which, they paid value. They paid a huge price for, but I mean, were amazing ways of getting information out there to fight propaganda.
Yes.
And then the next one is using visual countermeasures, which is one of the ones I try to do often. So this is your meme army, right?
Right.
Deploying art and videos and memes to combat lies and propaganda. And there's a lot of power in visual content. It's highly effective in conveying messages quickly and persuasively. So countering propaganda visually engages audiences who may not be interested in going deeper and going into an article or something more in depth. So using memes, art, videos to create those compelling narratives that challenge misinformation and promote freedom-based ideas. So one of the great ones and a huge inspiration to me are the propaganda posters and that were used to combat counter enemy narratives and the anti-war art and all of those things. Political cartoons are another great example that people kind of overlook. The anti-Vietnam art and even just like a modern example would be some of the street art by Banksy, who has challenged, political and social norms through satire. I think he might be an anarcho-satirist, by the way, Mike. So, So what do you think? I hit you with two there, using visual counter messages and flooding with truth.
Well, the two are related, and they're also related, I think, to probably my favorite of Saul Alinsky's original rules, which is Rule 5, which is, essentially the use of ridicule and the power of ridicule. And a visual medium can really, as you alluded to meme wars and everything, but the visual medium can really convey ridicule, and that's huge. We have an opportunity again to really drive home a powerful satire of the status quo in terms of ridicule in general, but particularly effective is the visual component of ridicule. And you are a gifted purveyor of visual ridicule, Free. So I think that's I think it stands to reason that you're calling that out in its own rule, in its own right, because it's very effective against the dominant narrative, and it's also something that they can't. I mean, it really does embody a lot of Alinsky's original thinking when you think about it. If it's done in such a way as to really challenge that false narrative, of the status quo, then the visual medium can be really effective. I think Bob is another. There's other cartoonist, Bob Moran, I think, is another one that comes to mind. I mean, he's had some really powerful images. Tends to be kind of right leaning, but powerful stuff. Really effective visuals that challenge the dominant narrative.
All right, last two, and then I'm calling it. The next one is disrupt monopolies. So challenge monopolistic businesses through competition. Monopolies restrict our freedom and control markets, limiting choices and forcing bland, generic life on us from a corporate level and ruin our autonomy and our local flavor. So breaking up their dominance would empower both communities and individuals. And the strategy there would be promoting local businesses, cooperatives, decentralized solutions that would help erode that monopolistic power.
Yeah.
And, so again, promoting local supply chains for goods and services, developing decentralized marketplaces, supporting decentralized apps over big tech platforms, using blockchain, of course, and then encouraging community-owned resources and utilities and ISPs and things like that. And then the second one is sabotage oppressive systems. So got to finish with one that's a little spicy, right?
That's right up my alley, as you know. Yeah.
Yeah. So undermine mechanisms that restrict our freedom. So oppressive systems, ironically, rely on compliance a lot of times.
That's right.
So disrupting these mechanisms can weaken their ability to control individuals and communities. So identifying weak points in oppressive structures and strategically disrupting them to reduce their effectiveness, or the one that we've talked about before about malicious compliance, using the hell out of the system to just completely overwhelm them with all of the compliance they can handle.
That's literally the campaign plank for Stephen McNamara in Kilmarnock, Scotland, is malicious compliance. Register your hummingbirds that visit, here as opposed to your chickens, right? Register anything, every pigeon you see landing on your property, or crow flying overhead. Register everything, with the government, and overwhelm their ridiculous system. Yeah.
So some strategies there would be, disrupting surveillance systems, encouraging whistleblowing and leaks to expose corrupt practices, developing decentralized alternatives, creating apps and technology that automate non-compliance or malicious compliance, and utilizing blockchain to render things like surveillance and censorship ineffective. So what do you think of those two?
Again, I look into our friends in the UK for their particularly in the greater London area, as they smash and otherwise disable ULEZ cameras. The Blade Runners of London are international heroes, as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely. When you have a dystopian surveillance state, you are well within your right to damage and otherwise sabotage their devices. Anybody that says otherwise, oh, well, your tax dollars, it's like you're wasting those tax dollars. Good. Good. Let's overwhelm the system. I guarantee you that if there was anything like that trying to be, and Governor Gavin Newsom here in California is, of course, looking at Sadiq Khan's ULEZ cameras, thinking, well, where can I do that? Maybe we should do that in San Francisco and Los Angeles or Sacramento. Yeah. Well, no. Let's. If anything like that was to ever happen in the United States, we are, I think, obligated as Americans to absolutely smash, sabotage, and in any way incapacitate any type of camera that's looking to tax us on our exhaust emissions. That's a requirement as an American. As far as I'm concerned, we are obligated to sabotage that type of surveillance. And I'm thinking, there's other ways we can probably do that digitally too, for that matter. And in some of the ways that we still have and are suffering under the reauthorization of the Patriot Act. So believe me, yes, I'm 100% on board with sabotaging oppressive systems.
If I was in the UK, would I have to register these birds?
Well,
or do they do it this way?
It's piss off.
Yeah. I'll give them one of each.
Give them one each. Might as well. Yeah.
Pick your bird, Kier.
Yes. Pick your bird.
And all right. Well, this was fun. I like inventing stuff, and especially when it's good for us and bad for them. What do you think of the whole thing?
I love it. I think that it was due for, and I don't think it's particularly uppity to want to add to Sal Alinsky's work. I think he left a lot of things unsaid simply because of his because of his particulars, right? His particulars as a Marxian leftist, and it was about time that some liberty-minded people not only adapt those rules, but add the rules that you added, which shape a more decentralized, more agorist, dare I say, a liberty-centered set of rules. So, I mean, I think you added another 13, right, or thereabouts. So I think that's perfect, and absolutely necessary, I think, for the modern digital age as well.
My intention was to add more than him, but that's an ego thing. But you know, I also thought we might end up cutting some, so I threw it all out there, see what would stick. You know,
I love it. That's all good, man.
But if I was around at that time, I would have kicked Alinsky's ass in the right direction. So
yeah, I'd like to think we would have been able to do that, right? I think a lot of those guys were just really misguided, you know, yeah, I'd certainly hit them with Samuel Edward Konkin III. You know, it's like, no, forget Marx. No, and not Marxism, agorism. That's what you guys need to know about.
So anything you want to say in closing here?
No, just if anybody has been inspired by this now, I think it's our 9th Township Liberation podcast, and is willing and able to do a township gathering, reach out to me through X at Two Free Mike. And let me help you organize. I want to try to get as many places as possible around the world gathering for their township's sake. And let's get a whole thing started. Test out your local community and the appetite for your local area for implementing some of the things we've been talking about in this podcast.
See how I did this? So like now I could just say like there, you know.
That's no, it's really,
it doesn't go over our faces. This is like that. This is some pretty high tech stuff, Mike.
We're really evolving here in 2025. So I'm glad everyone, you guys can all evolve with us. Let's see what we can implement this year.
Yeah, I fixed Alinsky's stuff. I fixed our stuff. I got a lot accomplished, man.
Fixing everything, man.
Went to Chicago, caught like whatever they had up there, brought that back with me, and as well as the cold, you know. Yeah. So yeah. No, man, I am pumped about this year. You know, compared to you, I'm mildly optimistic, but you know, at least I think, you know, we know what we're up to, and I'm excited about what we're going to do. And I'm excited about the friends we're making and the people across the globe that we're aligning with and really finding common values with and, you know, talking to about these things. So, I'm excited about what Mark's up to in New Zealand. I'm excited about our UK friends. I'm excited about all this. So really looking forward to it.
Me too. Gonna be a good year, my friend.
And all right. So while we're going out here, I just want to mention a couple of things while I play our little theme song. Contact information here. Follow his personal account and his Township Liberation account. Buy his book, $5, too cheap. Buy the book. Subscribe to my YouTube. So if I get deplatformed again, like I did last week and last month and last year, you can find me there. And I wanted to point out that on Saturday, 8 p.m., we are playing our game show. I was going to say our favorite game show, but it's nobody's favorite game show in my life.
Oh, it's fun.
You Aren't a Real Libertarian will be Saturday, 8 p.m. It's remarkable in the fact that you can come and wreck the contestants' scores and make your life miserable. So you might learn something, but you get to torture people, so it's kind of fun. So please join us then. And follow Terry, our wonderful producer. Bats T76. Bats T76. So follow her. Go help out Waz if you get the chance. Hit that little cashola button right about the R there in this image and help him out if you can. And appreciate you all and see you Saturday or next week, depending on what show you want to watch next. So thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.